Okay, hopefully anybody that's still struggling with factoring can use this review to help them study some more. What I would do is make a chart like this in your notes. Just make sure it's nice and big so you can fill those boxes in. So you want to look at a factoring problem and ask first, can you factor something out? And if you can, it would look something like this. And so a 3 goes into both numbers, and there's an x in both spots. So I would take out a 3x. And I'd get this. If you can't factor something out, then you want to look at how many terms there are. 2, 3, or 4. If there's 2 terms, then see if they are perfect squares. With a minus between. If that's the case, they'd look something like this. So 2 perfect squares with a minus between. And to factor these, you square root the first term, so the square root of 4x squared would be 2x. And you square root the last term, and one gets a plus, and one gets a minus. If they're not perfect squares, see if they're perfect cubes. And in this case, it wouldn't matter if they're the sum or the difference. If it's the sum of perfect cubes, then you follow this pattern. Cube root each and add them together. Square the first, subtract their product, and add the last one squared. So it would be something like this. If I cube root the 8x to the third, I'd get 2x. And if I cube root the 27, I get 3. So the first set of parentheses is the sum. Then I square the first term, so 2x squared is 4x squared. Multiply the 2 together, but change that sign to minus. And add the last one squared. If it's the difference, then it follows this pattern. Subtract them, square the first, add their product, and add the last one squared. So for both the sum and the difference, the pattern goes same sign, opposite sign, positive. Same sign, opposite sign, positive. So if I had the difference of 2 cubes, it would look something like this. When I cube root x to the third, I'd get x, and then when I cube root 125, I get 5. So the first parentheses, the sign stays the same. Then you square the first term, change the sign to addition, and multiply the 2 together, and then square the last term. If there's 3 terms, you want to see if they're perfect squares. And the test for a perfect square trinomial is to square root the first term, multiply that by the square root of the last term, and double it, or multiply by 2. If it equals the middle term, then it's a perfect square trinomial. And to factor it, you square root the first, square root the last, take the sign from the middle, put it in the parentheses and square it. So if I look at this, again, I notice I have 3 terms, and the first and the last are perfect squares, so it's my hint. The test would be to square root the 4x, so I'd get 2x. Square root the 9, so I get 3. This gives me 6x when I double it, I get 12x, which matches the middle term. So then I square root the first, square root the last, take the sign from the middle, put it in parentheses, and square it. If it's 3 terms but they're not perfect squares, and there's nothing in front of the x squared term, or what's there is 1, then it would look something like this. And so you're looking for factors of the last term that sum to middle. So I put 2 sets of parentheses, and my first term is x. And the second term, in this case, I'd have negative 40, so I'm looking for the factors of negative 40 that sum to negative 3, which would be negative 8 and positive 5. Your last option, if there's 3 terms, is if there's a number in front of the x squared term, but they're not perfect squares. So it would look something like this. For this one, you want to multiply the first and last. Find the factors of that sum to the middle. Replace the middle term with those 2. And then factor by grouping. So if I multiply 3 times negative 8, I get negative 24. And I'm looking for the factors of negative 24 that add up to negative 10. So it would be negative 12 and positive 2. Replace the middle term with those 2 terms. Make sure that you add the x on. And then factor by grouping. So from the first set of parentheses, I can take out a 3x. And from the second one, I can take out a 2. Then what's inside the parentheses comes out, and what's left over gets put back together. Which is basically what you would do with 4 terms. So if you start out with 4 terms, you factor by grouping. And it would look something like this. So I just put parentheses around these, and I can take out a 3x, and I can take out a 5, and I get x plus 2, and 3x plus 5. So what repeats gets taken out, and what's left gets put together. I hope this helped.